Everybody, this is Dream, and this is going to be our three-game slate for tomorrow, Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. I guess really today. Um, this slate features three games. All three games are set to be very tight and close games, so I expect that it's pretty even from that perspective. So with that said, let's get into the players. First of all, if you don't mind, hit that like, comment, and subscribe button. Make sure to subscribe, make sure to like the video, and then make comment below. Also share the video if you like it. Anyhow, let's look at the quarterbacks. The top overall play here is Colin Shiley for Kent State. He's just the best quarterback on the board. He's had some pretty big games this season, and he also gets rush yards that give him an added boost. He has had some off games, but overall he's been pretty solid so far this season. And his price point, while it is the most expensive on the slate, it's not all that terrible. Then we're going to look at Cole Snyder for Buffalo. Now, he's an interesting spot here. He doesn't really run like Shaley does, but he has some upside because he does get a decent amount of yards, and he's basically my second favorite quarterback on the slate due to yards and potential touchdowns and stuff like that. So he's done a pretty good job on the season. He's got a good matchup as well. And then the other two guys that I have here are kind of in a situation. This won't be known until very close to tip, and it's between Salopek and Bourget. I don't know how to say your guys' names. Sorry about that. But anyway, these two guys, the coach says that he's going to announce the starter right before the game. And regardless of who they start, they both look pretty interesting on this particular slate, depending on which one starts. Obviously, I like Salopek a little bit better, but they are cheap options. And so whichever one of those guys starts would be a pretty decent play for the S-Flex location, I think. But you will have to check in, and it may not be that easy to find out the information about who's going to start, close to the start of this slate. So just keep that in mind. But overall, I do think that the start of that game is kind of interesting. Anyhow, for the running backs, we're going to take a look at Lou Nichols, the third for Central Michigan. He's likely to get 25 to 30 rush attempts on this game. Now, he hasn't been particularly great in some games, a little bit inconsistent, but he's had some really big games as well, and he does have upside, and he has touchdown potential in this matchup, and so I do like him okay here. Then we're going to look at Marcus Cooper, who's the most expensive play on the slate for running backs, and he's been pretty solid this season. He's going to get, 25 to 30 rushes probably in this game. He has had 100 yards in the last three games, including 3 touchdowns, so I do think he's in a good spot with that. And so he's probably one of my favorite plays on the board overall. And then Sean Taylor for Western Michigan. He's a little bit more inconsistent than the other guys, but he's also a little bit cheaper. And so he's a decent play on this one. You do need, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, and a flex. So you could potentially put a guy like him in that flex position. And then Harrison Whaley here for NIU. He's an interesting spot here. He's a lot more consistent when it comes to the last 5 games. But he started the season off a little bit rough. But he does seem to get more yards per carry than some of the other options on the slate. And he's had three 100-yard games last 5 games. And so he comes in as a really good pick on this particular slate. Wide receivers, we're going to look at Walker. Walker for Kent State. Now, he's been getting a decent chunk of targets, 5 to 9 a game. He has some pretty good upside at this cheap price point. The only real risk for him is sometimes he doesn't get but 1 or 2 actual attempts or actual receptions. But he's been getting some touchdowns and stuff in most games. So I do think he's worth the price that he currently plays on this particular slate. Then we're going to look at Justin Marshall here for Buffalo. He's another guy that's a little bit too cheap for what he's done. He's getting 5 or so targets a game, and he's got some big-time games, so he definitely has some pretty good upside. But as you can see, he's had 4 under 10 fantasy point games, but he's really not had a completely terrible game, and his price point's cheap enough that we can take a risk with him. Quinn Williams for Buffalo is another guy in a similar spot. He's been getting a ton of targets, but he hasn't been turning them into a lot of yards, so he doesn't have the super ideal option, but he's still okay here, and I do like him on this particular slate. especially with his price point. And then finally, Corey Crooms for Western Michigan. He's a guy I like here. His price point is really decent for what he's been doing. He's getting over 10 targets per game, and he's scoring a touchdown in quite a few games. And so I do like him on the slate. He's got some good potential in this one. It's really hard to differentiate these six teams, rather. They're all expected to score about the same amount of points, and all three games are expected to be pretty close. As for the defensive aspect, all of them are pretty similar in the defensive side, and you can kind of see that here if I scroll through the different teams. There's not a big difference between the defensive rankings of each team. The only one that's really tough is probably NIU and their position against Western Michigan. They're going to have the toughest for quarterbacks. But again, I mean, that quarterback situation is actually a mess anyway. So there were a couple guys I wanted to avoid there simply because we're not going to know who's going to start and stuff like that. So anyhow, it's an interesting slate. It's going to be kind of strange because everybody's kind of projected to play about the same, and they all have kind of similar styles. I mean, they play, I think most of them play in the same conference. But anyhow, that's what I got for you guys. Thank you guys for liking, commenting, subscribing, and have a nice day, guys. Yeah.